TFA fam, welcome back in. It is Sunday Night Football. It is halftime, so that means it is the first look at Week 5 waivers. We obviously have the two additional games coming up on Monday night, so hopefully nothing crazy happens there. We also have our first week of bye weeks coming up, so we will be without the Lions, Chargers, Eagles, and Titans for Week 5. So make sure you're keeping that in mind when you're doing your waivers for this week. But with that out of the way, Kev, let's go ahead and dive into the QB streaming options that you have laid out for Week 5.
Yeah, I'll be honest, there's not like great options sitting out there, and there's not great matchups, I guess, more so than anything. But one that kind of surprised me was Justin Fields. He's only rostered in 32% of leagues. They get Dallas this week, but Fields continues to play well. Today was his best performance, completing 22 of 34 for 312 yards and a touchdown. He also rushed another 10 times and 55 yards and another 2 rushing touchdowns on the ground for 32 fantasy points. I think with just Fields' rushing upside, he will always be in play, but I think if he can continue to thrive as a passer, Fields could be a top 10 option the rest of the way. This week, the Steelers take on a Cowboys defense that has allowed the 14th most PPR or 14th most fantasy points to the position. And so I do think Fields is definitely a viable option. Probably should be rostered way more leagues than this. Even just moving forward, it's just a weekly option, not just a streaming option. Next up, I really don't feel great about putting him on here, but I'm going to anyways. And that's Trevor Lawrence, rostered in 33% of leagues. Lawrence wasn't great again, but I don't know. I wouldn't say he was terrible. He completed 18 of 33 for 169 yards and 2 scores against the Texans. This week, the Jaguars will look to get back into the win column with a matchup against the Colts, who have allowed the 9th most points to the position. So Trevor Lawrence is an option. They did look a little bit better this week. They had an opportunity to win late, but just couldn't get it done. But Trevor Lawrence, I think, is an option this week against the Colts. And then next up, now this is very much dependent on what's going to happen because I honestly, if Anthony Richardson is out this week, I think Joe Flacco would be probably borderline top option. I probably still would prefer Justin Fields, but Joe Flacco would be right there behind him because, like I said, it's a situation we're going to have to monitor with Richard leaving with a hip injury. But it really didn't make any sense of what the Colts decided to do here because he left with a hip injury and they brought him back. And then, like the first or second play, he comes back. They had him go on a design run, and he got hurt again and had to leave the game. Richard did say after the game that he was sore. It was really hard for him to push off. So we'll see if he's isn't able to play. I think Flacco does make for one of the best streaming options this week. As they take on a Jags defense that has allowed the second most fantasy points to the position. So Joe Flacco would definitely be an option. Next up, Tyler Huntley. With weapons like Tyreek Hill, Jalen Waddle, Devon Achane, Huntley should be a decent streaming option almost every single week just because of the weapons they have. They always take on a Patriots defense that has allowed the 16th most fantasy points to quarterbacks. And we'll see how Huntley performs tomorrow night. But if he plays really well, I'm going to guess he's also going to be another one of the top streaming options because he does provide rushing upside as well. And that is something we're always looking for in our quarterbacks just because it raises their floor. And like I said, when you get these kind of weapons surrounding him, Huntley could really be a really nice option next week. Lastly, we have Andy Dalton. Dalton, once again, played really well, completing 25 of 40 passes for 220 yards and 2 touchdowns and 1 interception. Now, that being said, this is not a great matchup this week as the Bears have allowed the 3rd fewest fantasy points to the position. So it's not really great. And just kind of looking around other options, there's just not a lot out there because there's not a lot of great matchups this week. Plus, we have some bye weeks. But I know people that with people with maybe Jared Goff or obviously Jalen Hurts, people are going to be looking around for streaming options, and this just isn't a great week. Maybe another option. He was kind of borderline like a Derek Carr. They get Kansas City this week at on the road on Monday Night Football. He's another option. He's kind of borderline, but I think that those are kind of the options you're looking at this week.
Yeah, it's also not a fantastic week for running back either. Not a ton of guys I would consider must add, but I am going to kick things off here with Kareem Hunt at the top. After Carson Steele had a fumble, he had, I think, 1 carry after that and was on the field very limited snaps after his fumble. Hunt was also who was on the field to close the game out outside of P. Ryan vulturing the goal line touchdown. So if this is going to be Kareem Hunt's backfield going forward, that is certainly going to be something that we want to jump on. I think he's around 30% owned in both ESPN and Yahoo League. So he's going to be the top clear at here. The other guy, Justice Hill, I had him on this list prior to him doing what he's doing tonight. Just wanted to throw that out there. He's someone I've been talking about for the past few weeks, having himself a day here through the first half of Sunday Night Football, nearly 70 yards and a score, just 5 touches, though. That's something we're obviously not going to chase. but in 2 of his 3 weeks leading up to this, he has at least 50 total yards. We saw him relied on even going back to last year and throughout their playoff run as well. So he's someone I would definitely look at, even just as like a PPR flex option with bye weeks and injuries starting to take over the fantasy landscape. Moving on to some of the guys who I'm throwing into the handcuff plus range. Samaje P. Ryan, he actually only had 3 fewer snaps compared to Hunt, but was out touched 16-5. So he's someone who should be on your radar as well. Tyler Algier, I bumped up from handcuff to handcuff plus. This kind of feels like the Braylon Allen thing where he's like slowly starting to eat into Bijan Robinson's touches here, getting closer and closer to a like 50-50 split as time goes on. If you look at some of the advanced metrics too, he has also outplayed Bijan Robinson. I don't think that's something that's going to continue. I'm not saying you should be considering Tyler Algier over Bijan, but if he's sitting out there, he's definitely somebody I want on my bench. Antonio Gibson, 10 total opportunities today, actually led the Pats in receiving yards, although 50 of his 67 yards came on 1 catch. We also had a Jermichael Hasty sighting here in this one, but with running back being as thin as it is, and like I said, with bye weeks and everything coming up, he's someone you could consider. Moving on to Tank Bigsby, kind of the same thing and same story with him. Has some standalone value, but if anything were to happen to Trevor Etienne, he is going to pop off here. Roshan Johnson, he, Swift must have heard all the chatter that he was washed and Roshan was coming for his job because Swift absolutely balled out today. But the underlying news here is that Khalil Herbert didn't register a single snap. So Roshan could still be viewed as an ad here. He did kind of save his day for anyone that started him with a 1 yard touchdown. Emmanuel Wilson, he is also starting to eat into Josh Jacobs' workload. Obviously, this is a game where they were playing catch up as well, and the snaps here were pretty even between Wilson and Josh Jacobs. Jaleel McLaughlin, I'm just throwing on here. Don't feel great about this offense, but Audric Estime on IR, and Tyler Bidet had a very scary injury, collapsed on the side after taking a hit in that game. So still haven't heard anything from that, but gotta assume that he's going to miss a few weeks as well. So that really makes this backfield thin. It comes down to just Javonte and McLaughlin. So you can look for him. Handcuffs, Trey Sermon. I did bump Ty Chandler down. He has been losing some work over the past couple of weeks, where it's like closer to, like a 60-40-ish, 70-30 type of split through the first 2 weeks. Ty Chandler has been Aaron Jones has been heavily out touching Ty Chandler over the past couple of weeks. Deep ads or stashes. I threw Jeremy McNichols on here, not just because of the 2 touchdowns he registered, but I thought he actually looked pretty good in the touches that he did get. Obviously, this one's going to come down to whether or not Austin Eckler can make it back from his concussion. I think it is a little worrisome for Eckler with how early that he was declared out, when we really don't see that with these guys with concussions. So if this ends up being a multi-week thing, think for deeper leagues, you could look to Jerry McNichols. Stashing Jalen Wright, I still think he's super talented and on a good offense. And then Tyrone Tracy, we saw his snaps come back down a little bit in week 4. He also had a big play called back due to a penalty, but he's still someone who's widely available who I'd want to have tucked away on my bench.
Yeah, and just quickly, I just sometimes we got to take L's around here, and I'm going to take one on the Carson Steele one because it is not looking good for old Carson Steele so far. Really struggled today. Another fumble, not looking good. So I think that's what you got to do sometimes. You got to be transparent. But let's go over to the wide receivers. And speaking of the Chiefs, Rashee Rice looks like he is done for the year. Andy Reid said after the game that they need to confirm tomorrow, but they fear that he tore his ACL, which it's very rare that it's not a torn ACL whenever they say that. Usually they can do some tests internally and they pretty much have a pretty good idea. So that being said, there's nobody you're getting that's going to replace Rashee Rice. I mean, Xavier Worthy's already rostered in like 80% of leagues, and the other Chiefs receivers, I just don't know. I think if you were going to look for one, it would probably be maybe Juju Smith-Schuster, because he does very similar things to Rashee Rice, but he's also like a very poor, like homeless person's Rashee Rice. Like So like he's nowhere close to the same as Rashee Rice, but he does a lot of the same things that Rashee Rice does. That's what they did with him a few years ago when he was with this team. But Juju Smith-Schuster is also just not the same wide receiver he used to be. But if I had to take a shot on one of them that's available, it probably would be Juju Smith-Schuster. But I don't feel great about any of them. It's not looking good. I mean, this team continues to take major injuries to this offense. Now with Pacheco and now Rashee Rice likely done for the year. However, I will say this. The number one waiver ad this week for me is Dontavian Wicks. 13% roster. Christian Watson left early with what sounds like a high ankle sprain, but he'll have an MRI tomorrow. Once Watson left, though, Wicks became the team's leading target. He ran 80% of the routes and led the team with 24% target share and a 35% air yard share. He also finished with 5 catches, 78 yards, and 2 touchdowns for 25 PPR points. If Watson is out long term, like, if so, this is like a short term IR stay or something like that for him, Wicks becomes just next week is a solid wide receiver to play against the Rams. Dontavian Wicks is somebody that we talked a lot about this offseason. Kind of, he was a trendy sleeper option. And I think he is hashtag good at football. Like, I think he is but he was always going to be kind of blocked with all of the pass catchers they have here within this offense. Now you take Christian Watson out. Dontavian Wicks now becomes like a legitimate wide receiver 2, wide receiver 3 moving forward, as long as Christian Watson out. I will say Romeo Doubs is also kind of out there in 45% of leagues. He's also in play just because this kind of narrows things down a little bit. But Dontavian Wicks is easily the number one guy that I want to add overall this week of all the options that we have so far. Next up, you have Xavier Legette. He's another player we talked about last week, 14% rostered. But this week, he was targeted 10 times, hauled in 6 of them for 66 yards and a touchdown. Good for 18 PPR points. Legette will continue to be fantasy relevant with Adam Thielen sideline, as well as having the league's worst defense, continually making them have to play catch up all the time. So Xavier Legette, I definitely think, obviously rookie wide receiver, somebody that definitely should be rostered well more than 14% of leagues. It's somebody that, I think Andy Dalton can support 2 pass catchers here within this offense. So Xavier Legette is another really good option to add this week. Wan'Dale Robinson rostered 27% of leagues. Robinson continues to be the underneath eater for the Giants offense. He was targeted another 14 times, and he hauled 11 of them for just 71 yards on Thursday night against the Cowboys. He has now seen nearly 40 targets through 4 games and makes for a decent wide receiver 4 play against the Seahawks. We'll also have to monitor Malik Neighbors, who left that game with an injury. But, with that game playing Thursday, hopefully that gives a better shot of Malik Neighbors still being able to play. But overall, Wan'Dale Robinson PPR formats, if he's going to continue to see this heavy of target share, it's hard to not, at least give him a look. Next up is Trey Tucker. I think people are going to be more excited about him than I am. But I will say over the last 2 games, he has scored 22 and 15 PPR points. He's been also targeted 15 times the last 2 weeks and has 2 touchdowns over that same span. Some may have him a little bit higher than me this week, but they get a matchups against the Broncos and Steelers the next 2 weeks. Very, very rough matchups against those 2 defenses. But I think I wouldn't blow more than like 3 to 5% of FAB or even a high waiver priority add on Trey Tucker. I think he's a useful option with PPR with waivers going on, or with bye weeks going on, excuse me. But still, Trey Tucker is not something that I'm running out to add. Just because I hate these next 2 weeks of matchups that they have. Next up is Josh Downs, only rostered in 8% of leagues. Downs recorded 8 receptions on 9 targets for 82 yards and a touchdown. He did this despite only playing 51% of the snaps. He still had a solid performance with 22 PPR points. Down flash last year before getting hurt, but now in his first game of action, he once again proved why he should be rostered in way more leagues than just 8%. Next up is Mike Williams. It's been a slow start for Mike Williams, who's recovering from his ACL tear last September, but the Jets' offense was dreadful today. But Williams is one of the kind of like semi-bright spots for this team. 4 receptions for 67 yards on 5 targets. With Garrett Wilson drawing so much attention, we could see Big Mike earn a bigger role within this offense. This week, the Jets take on a Vikings defense that has yielded the 8th most PPR points to wide receivers. So I do think Mike Williams is definitely a look in 12-team leagues. Jerry Jeudy rostered in 46% of leagues. I know it's not a sexy name, but in PPR formats, he could be an option as bye week start. He's been targeted 30 times through the first 4 games, and with double-digit PPR points at 3 of his last 4 games. Let's just keep hoping that they finally switch to Jameis Winston to take over at quarterback, because Deshaun Watson ain't it. But either way, Jerry Jeudy, I definitely think should be rostered in more leagues. And then lastly, I want to talk about Tutu Atwell. He brought in 4 of 6 targets for 82 yards. He has back-to-back double-digit PPR performances. However, there is a chance Cooper Cup could return this week, though I wouldn't bet on it as the Rams get a Week 6 bye. So I would imagine if he was going to return, it probably would be after the bye. But Atwell does deserve some consideration. And then just some other options. Jordan Whittington. Whittington led the team with 8 targets today on against the Bears, but he held in 6 them for 62 yards. Whittington continues to play the slot for this offense and should continue to carve out a role moving forward as long as Cooper Cup is sidelined. So Whittington is kind of a deeper league ad if you want to take a look there. And then the rest of these guys, Darius Slayton is more of a, if Malik Neighbors were to miss, maybe you can take a look there. Noah Brown, he gets a little bit of opportunities. And the rest of these guys are much more deeper, just kind of bench stashes, if you will, at wide receiver, especially in like a 14, 16 team league like Tremaine Burton, Jalen Polk, Adonai Mitchell, Luke McCaffrey, McCole Hardman. All those guys would be you can take a look at in those formats.
Let's finish this out with the week 5 tight end streams, and it is Penn State week at tight ends for this week. And to kick things off with Mike Gesicki. Going into this week, the Ravens had given up the second most half PPR points per game to tight ends. Gesicki actually played the third fewest snaps among Bengals tight ends today, but ran the most routes. So I'm assuming in a closer game next week, Gesicki sees his snaps bump back up to where they had been. Ty Conklin gets a matchup against the Vikings. They've been rolling all year. So this could be a game where the Jets can't rely on handing the ball off to Hall and Allen as much as they have been. Conklin also saw another 8 targets today. Only came up with 4 for 14. So I wouldn't expect another line like that if he gets a similar workload next week. Jawan Johnson, former Penn State great. Taysom Hill left the game today, did not return. That is the second injury he has sustained in the first 4 weeks. And Moreau was actually the guy who was leading the group earlier in the year. But today, Johnson ran 27 routes to just 7 for Moreau. So it's a little bit of a thin play, but going up against Kansas City, who's let up production at tight ends all year, could certainly do worse. And then this one, like Kev was saying, kind of depends on what happens with Malik Neighbors and the concussion protocol. But Theo Johnson could be an interesting punt play who is widely available going up against the Seahawks. Other than Wan'Dale Robinson, it's Darius Slayton. The Seahawks secondary is also legit. So Theo Johnson could have some open looks week 5.
Another name that I would add really quickly to that would be Tucker Kraft, only rostered in 4% of leagues. They get a great matchup this week against the Rams. Rams have the 4th most PPR points to tight ends. And he was targeted 9 times today, 6 catches, 53 yards, and a score, also converted a 2-point conversion. And he continues to outplay and out snap Luke Musgrave as well. So Tucker Kraft, I think, is also another option you definitely could look at here with 14 PPR points today. So I definitely think Tucker Kraft would be another name that I definitely would have on my radar, especially just for the matchup that he's going to have too, as well with the Rams, who really struggle to stop anybody. So I think that would be the last one I'd look to talk about as well. Really quickly, gets a couple of these. Kanoa, sub drop 1, Eckler or Dowdle PPR with kick return stats. Eckler, RB4 sitting on bench.
So I tried to ask Kanoa what the total points were between the two. I would just hope that we hear something by Tuesday in terms of Eckler. I mean, depending on how much those return stats really factor in, that's what I wait and see. Because if Eckler is going to miss another week, you could just drop him. Dowdle was taking over a little bit in that backfield for the Cowboys. But if it's your RB4, you probably just want to have someone you can swing with. So in a vacuum, I'd probably drop Dowdle, but I try and wait and see what ends up happening with Eckler's concussion.
Yeah, it's a tough situation. The Cowboys running backs have just been really bad this year. Their Dowdle started to show some signs of life, and I think if I was going to drop it, it probably would be Eckler, just because I think Dowdle has a better shot of just kind of taking over as the lead back, where I don't know if that ever would happen for Austin Eckler, but that is a tough one. Daniel down by 3. He has Gibbs, JSN. I have St. Brown, H.A. Monty. Or should I play Pollard PPR? No, I would leave it the way that you have it.
Yep.
I think that's it. Is that it? Yeah, I think that might be it. Kraft are out and good options. Yep, we just talked about Tucker Kraft.
And I just feel like every time he does something and you go and try and put him in, he just gives you a dud.
Yeah, I don't think that he's a fantastic option. That's kind of how he always is. Like I play him here and there in like DFS at times, and he just doesn't Like it never happens. I never get it right. So
Yeah.
but other than that, it's been a it's been a these damn injuries, man. Like it has been a wild year for injuries and practice injuries. With those keep popping up
Yeah.
like just out of nowhere.
Hamstrings
Yeah,
everywhere.
just guys
Just
getting hurt in
fucking
practices, and I mean it has been a rough year for injuries. And it's only week 4. We're not even done with week 4 yet, and so it's just frustrating. So yeah, it's just a mash unit right now. We kind of joked about the like looking at like DraftKings this week and like clicking wide receivers and like every wide receiver had questionable next to their name. It's just like it's been brutal. So hopefully this starts to balance out. We can get less of these, but it just continues to happen. So hate to see it, but yeah, drop Myers for Wicks absolutely. Dontavian Wicks to me is the number 1 waiver ad for me. Like just because I think that he is a legit, really good wide receiver, and I think he has a shot to lead this team over the next couple of weeks. So I think Dontavian Wicks is a definite ad for me. So I would
yeah,
definitely do
every time he's got an opportunity, he's produced.
yeah. So yeah, I know he was like one of like Matt Harmon. People are familiar with him, like reception perception god. He's one of his like favorite players that in reception perception. He's really produced really well, but he's always been kind of blocked. So honestly, if he produces well over the next 2 or 3 weeks, like he could end up just taking over and like being that guy, like where Christian Watson is more of just like a part-time player. So we'll see. So really quick, we'll get out of here. Myers, Bates, Sanders, or Folk a shot at 15 points tomorrow. Hard thing about Jake Bates, who I love, that it's just Dan Campbell, and Dan Campbell goes for it on 4th down all the time and takes away opportunities from him. Myers would be also, I think, up there. Just and if well, I'm gonna pull this up really quickly so I can take me 5 seconds, but pull up my kicker rankings and tell you exactly. But I was happy. I checked my thing again. I was the 9th highest among all rankers, like 140 people and kickers last week. So I can't see last week's because this week's already started.
Mm.
Yeah, I would probably go with Myers, honestly. I like that game environment for tomorrow and everything else. It's inside the dome. So I think that's what I would probably do. I'd probably go with Myers. So yeah. Anyways, all right. Let's go ahead and get out of here, wrap this thing up. Hopefully there's no huge injuries tomorrow.
Yeah.
Hopefully it just goes smoothly and we have nothing to talk about past that because it's just like we said, it's been brutal around here. So we'll be back after this and we'll be back early, to get more with more content coming out this week with our week 5 stuff, week 5 rankings, and defense kicker streams will be out probably on Tuesday as well. So that being said, we'll talk to you guys soon. Again, let's say a prayer for all of our for all these players, and hopefully we don't lose any more because it's been a lot so far. So, anyways, have a good rest of the night. We'll see you guys soon. Bye.